certainly in retrospect, I think now, damn, if this was the case, why did they even sign him to that deal? There was no need to sign Deshaun Watson to that extension. The only logic for it would be two-part, because he's the guy of your future. You're just showing a level of belief in him and confidence in him, and it could be like a good morale boost or something like that. And then the idea that he would be more expensive the longer you wait, right? If they waited the next year, CBA, or like salaries will be higher. Basically, the market it'll be a different kind of market. Okay. So those are the only real reasons for why they did that. But like, if let's say Deshaun Watson is expressing some level of skepticism with the organization, okay, why negotiate that kind? Like, everybody should still be on a prove it deal. He wouldn't have been playing on his 5th-year option until this past year. So that was 2 years too early on his contract. He didn't have to do it. And if he's expressing doubt and skepticism with the organization, which, to be fair, he would have been right to do, because they were screwing it up. Like, he was right on his point. Okay. But if that's the case, I don't know what the rush was to get that deal done, because it's not like he could leave you anyway. I was making this point last week. In a weird way, Deshaun Watson signing that, not even in a weird way, this is just what happened. Deshaun Watson signing that contract extension is what empowered him to be able to leave. Like, without it, he's stuck here. He's stuck here through the rebuild and through whatever the hell else he doesn't want to be going through. Like, he's stuck. The contract extension and inserting that no trade clause on the back end is what empowered him. Okay. He got more money, for one thing, so he had more cushion to fall on and to make the decision of, hey, I'll sit out if you make me. And then he had the no trade clause to to dictate where he would go, to dictate his next destination. And so the power for Deshaun Watson was in the contract extension, and it was taken away from the Texans, like by paying him, okay, and signing him to the contract. They lost their control of the situation, which is a fascinating thing to think about in retrospect, because I certainly wasn't thinking of it like that at the time.
Yeah.
But that's basically what happened here. They signed a guy too early, and it cost them the guy that they signed, which is a mind bleep if you ask me. But that's what happened.
Yeah, to go back to that phrase you said there, like, at that time, was the exact phrase. If you've listened to the David Mugoletta interview with Ryan Clark from ESPN on that podcast, he used that exact phraseology when he was talking about when they signed the contract. He said it was an easy deal to do. Everybody came to the right value. Yeah, he ran rings around them in terms of negotiation, got heavy cash flow at the front end, got the no trade clause, and he said it was a place that he liked playing at that time. And Brandon, I suppose Caserio's, if we move on to the sort of secondary press conference or the Saturday morning press conference, which attracted a number of reporters, partly because they often don't have commitments, so it was a bit of a scrum to get questions in. But your question certainly drew a very distinct reaction from Caserio. He sort of, I don't know if you listened to the audio back, but he sort of chuckled under his breath. He then had a sort of kind of irked look, and then he even sort of did the stick the tongue in the side of the mouth kind of reaction to hold himself from saying anything. And you could tell it pissed him off to no end that he had to deal with that no trade clause. And I think obviously he knows. I took a bit of solace in the fact that I saw that, for a guy who's pretty calm, analytical, logical thinker, he was majorly pissed with that outcome, and you could tell that. And the way you asked the question was very, very appropriate. Would it make you think about inserting these clauses in the future, etc. Apologies if I've misphrased that, but you could tell his reaction said more than his answer did, and I think that gave me a little bit of comfortability in him. I've not had much over the time, but certainly you knew that how much he realised that the agent using that really changed the direction and the direct result of what equity they got back. And you could tell it really, really fucking irked them, you know?
Yeah, if I had the opportunity, and sometimes we do get this chance, and just sometimes we don't. And this was one of those where it didn't really feel like I'd be able to, but I would have put them aside. And if I didn't get this on the record, I wouldn't share it. But I'll just tell you what I would have asked them. Like, do you think do you think something should be done about how these contracts are negotiated and how these no trade clauses are used? Basically, getting at the question of the heart of the question being, right? Should should a player and an agent be able to weaponize a no trade clause to force a trade? Because the way we understood it or have understood no trade clauses to work for as long as we've been around is that it is veto power. It is to keep you from going to, and I don't necessarily hate the idea that a player can control his own destiny. So I want to be clear on that end. I'm not opposed to that. I just think that it needs to be clearer on what things are. I don't love especially being somebody that who has Texans interest, don't like the idea that the no trade clause was weaponized and used to get a guy out of here. Not opposed to players, agents having some type of mechanism that allows them to, like if everybody could agree, maybe it would be different. Okay, put it to you this way: maybe it would be different if that was how no trade clauses were used, or if we didn't call it a no trade clause. Like if that was already the sort of the terms of engagement, if we knew that on the front end, we did not. The way we understood a no trade clause to work was it was when they wanted to send you somewhere that you didn't want to go. I hadn't heard of anybody saying, "Hey, trade me," on the front end, saying, "Hey, trade me. I'm not going to play for you anymore. You must trade me." And then say, "Oh, and by the way, that contract that we negotiated the last time we negotiated a contract has a no trade clause. And so not only will you trade me, but you will trade me where you want to go." So could there be, this would have been my question to Nick, could there be something to be done to not allow a no trade clause to be used, to be weaponized to force a trade as opposed to just vetoing one? And that was the question that I asked him, and on the record was just, what did he think about that? But as a follow-up, I would love to know what, and he didn't really answer it, right? But as a follow-up, I would love to know what he thinks could be done institutionally or legal or procedurally or through the league or through a collective bargaining agreement. If they could come to an agreement on how these things work, and everybody knows up front how these things work. Because that was very confusing. It's like, oh, wait a minute. When I think of no trade clauses, I think about baseball. I don't really think about football because there's like maybe a dozen of them in the league at a time. It's not a bunch of guys running around here with no trade clauses.
Yeah.
So the fact that was even in the contract was a little odd. And then, of course, the unprecedented way in which it was weaponized and Nick Caserio having to deal with it, like he didn't negotiate that. And I'm not going to give him so much credit to say that he wouldn't have allowed it to begin with. Okay. I'm not going to blame him for it because he wasn't here for it. But also, like, this one pulled the wool over everybody's eyes because no one had seen this before. I'm going to demand a trade, refuse to play, and then I'll only go to the place that I select because I have a no trade clause. Very creative, very interesting. Feels a little slimy, but I mean, that's the business, and so I would just love to know what happens next. What comes of the no trade clause in the future, if anything. There's a template now, like, so to that point, the next player that tries to negotiate a no trade clause, does management, does team management, whoever's negotiating on the team's behalf, do they say, "Nah, man, I remember what Deshaun Watson did with that thing. Deshaun Watson signed this contract with a no trade clause and was out of here, was ready to be out of here in 6 months," or whatever the time span was. He was out of here. Like we didn't even get half a year. We got one season and not even half a calendar year before this guy was ready to go. No, we're not putting a no trade clause in there. Or, I'm very interested. What is the future of the no trade clause on football after this?
Yeah, I think it's just as simple as you put a clause in or a sub clause if you request a trade, your no clause is vetoed. I think, and that would have been prudent anyway for it. But it just shows you, I think that as you said, the trade judo, if you like, or the detail was turned upon both clubs. I think when you think about the structure of the contract in Cleveland, where he basically can't lose, next to negligible amounts of money for, his upcoming salary, when he basically negotiated a contract to leave somewhere, the antithesis of what you'd assume you're signing a contract for. And all fucking credit to the agent. I mean, he completely outfoxed everybody, including the owners and billionaires and it's not. I mean, I hate that phrase, chess and checkers, but that's about as close as you can get to it. When you understand somebody's constructs and sub clauses and league rules, and you use it against them all to get your client more money and fair play to him, and I suppose we never got the answer, that we wanted about, the court, any sort of probably any closure, and you might get that in the lead up to whenever we play Cleveland, and guarantee the schedule makers will, make it at the back end, pending any sort of kind of suspension and all that kind of thing. But
let me do the reading between the lines though, because I will say that what he gave us, while not satisfactory to our standard, like we didn't think it was enough. You agree, and most people agree. But he did say something, okay? And his answer was, we were going in different directions at the time, and basically, in order for me to do the thing, for me to accomplish the things that I wanted to do, this is the agreement that we came to. What that means, okay? And this isn't Morse code. He didn't think they were doing enough to win. He did not trust leadership. And it went all the way up to the top to ownership. He actually liked Bill O'Brien. We all know that. Like, that's not just something that he said for the cameras and for the microphones. He legitimately did like Bill O'Brien. I do not know where we would be right now, if we would still be here right now, if Bill O'Brien was still the coach. That is a hypothetical that I almost don't even like mentally. I don't want to play that game, quite honestly. Like, how that relationship would have affected Deshaun's decision making, and whether he would have demanded a trade, or if they would have been able to talk it out, because he did like Bill O'Brien so much. Bill O'Brien's also the one who traded DeAndre Hopkins, not alone, right? Did it with Easterby, but he's also the one that traded DeAndre Hopkins. He's also the one that negotiated all of those bad contracts, traded for Laramie Tunsil for Deshaun, right, to protect Deshaun, but did that anyway. Screwed them out of draft capital. They ended up having to pay that guy sticker price, Laramie Tunsil, that is. Gave out a lot of other bad contracts, Whitney Merciless being one of them, Randall Cobb. So like, Bill O'Brien was the reason for, in large part, okay, the fact that Bill O'Brien was empowered to be the primary football decision maker was the reason why they were going in the wrong direction, as Deshaun Watson would describe it. But he also had an affinity for Bill O'Brien. Did not believe in leadership, in management, okay, but that was essentially Bill O'Brien. So like, that's the part that is a little bit confusing. I would love to have a little bit more depth of a conversation and kind of figure out what were the exact things, other than the Hopkins trade, obviously, like that was huge. But what were some of the other things that stood out to Deshaun that gave him red flags, and gave him pause about the organization, aside from, like, were the things that I just mentioned that you and I could rattle off as people who follow the team, or could have been something else, something interpersonal, right? That we wouldn't know about. I would love to know what the answer to that is, but just wanted to say that he did the part about going in different directions. Like, if you read between the lines, that means those guys sucked at putting together a team, and I think I'm better than that. That's what he meant. He thinks he's better than the Texans. Yeah. Do with that what you will, Texans fans.
I don't think he's wrong. Certainly. He's certainly not wrong in the 18-month, 20-month spiral that the team was on. And I think when you think of, like, the last 14 months, you could tell on Saturday morning when you were sitting there in front of Caserio, he wanted this done. He wanted to see the back of it. Lovie Smith made comments a bit more directly and a little bit less tactfully about, moving on is good for both sides. But
Yeah.
and when he started off Caserio talking about clarity and everything, and when I was watching it, and at the time, and subsequently upon reflection, I think when you think of you sustained the uncomfortable for 14 months, and then and then once you had some clarity from the legal point of view, you traded him within a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, right? And my point is that for me, I'll always look back on that trade and say Caserio overvalued the clarity versus the actual value and equity of return that he perhaps should have got. Now, I know the no trade clause was a big angle, but my point, I keep going back to, what was the rush? Why did it have to be done now? We're not playing till September. If you had waited till, right into the depths of April up till the draft, you then opened up an extra year of draft picks. So to pull the trigger at that point, to me, is still nonsensical. A week or so on, that it didn't need to be that way. And time works equally on both sides of the table in a negotiation. And the time sat with the Texans because, if you pay him $35 million this year, if he's on or off, if he's off the team, or you have those picks, and it's one pick this year, by the way, that's not picks multiple that are of any equity, then what was the rush? And I still keep going back to that in my head all the time. You didn't need to do it now. You pulled the trigger too early. But I think Caserio, and I understand why, and it must have been frustrating as hell for him, but he overvalued the clarity over the actual equity return that he got in terms of draft picks and zero players.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit different on this. I agree with the point of the return being less than ideal. I was surprised to not see. I would have been okay with either the second round picks or the players. I didn't necessarily need both. The fact that they got neither, no second round picks, no players, I thought was a sham. I thought that was ridiculous. Was very, very disappointed in that. Just to say that off top, that I agree with that notion. I'm not somebody that's like you needed picks and players, but you needed one or the other. Like you couldn't come out of here with basically just 3 first round picks. I thought for sure you would have some kind of mix of players.
Yeah.
Like the 3 first round picks were standard. And then some type of mix of players and twos. They didn't get neither one of those. I was very, very disappointed to see that. However, I actually was okay with the clarity part. And I would also ask the question and would be curious of what the answer would be was how much is clarity worth to you, man?
Well, that's it, yeah.
Like how much would you pay for a peace of mind? Which I think is an interesting philosophical question to begin with. Like no matter what the situation is, like how much would you pay for a peace of mind if something was bothering you and you just needed to get rid of this thing, this burden, okay? And so it's just interesting from a thought experiment. How much is clarity worth? But I'm okay with just moving on, getting the 3 first round picks because I think that no matter what was going to be the hallmark of the trade either way. Like you needed the 3 first round picks. Of course, I thought that it was also standard to get the twos, at least a couple of twos, if not players, one or the other. They didn't get that, but I am okay with the fact that so they've already lost a year behind this whole thing. You asked the question, what's the rush? Yeah. The rush is that you've already lost a year, and that if this thing goes past the draft, like you were saying, you don't have to do it right now. Yeah, no, you don't. You're right about not having to do it right now. Do you really want to miss another draft? Do you want Deshaun Watson to hold you hostage for 2 straight drafts? Do you like at what point do you say, okay, this thing's got to get done one way or the other? They were talking about this before the trade. Like you heard from Lovie Smith saying that he'd like to see a deal done sooner rather than later. And I feel like Nick Caserio probably had made some similar comments about that, about, once the information becomes more relevant and prevalent. Like I didn't get the sense that they wanted this thing to linger any further than it already had. So I already got the sense that they were ready to like move on, get into this draft, which is deep. Okay, this is the perfect draft to have multiple first round picks, to have which is maybe another reason why I didn't understand why they didn't get the twos, because it's also a good draft to have multiple twos.
Well, yeah,
You
I was
know,
going to say for me, we'll come on to
yeah,
that in a bit, but I think the twos would have been in theory more value potentially. And look, nobody's got a crystal ball, right? But yeah, it feels
right.
like the twos and the even thirds might have had more money because like the compensation changed.
Yeah.
And okay, you got an extra fourth round pick. Quite why it changed, I don't think anybody's that clear. Caserio put down as procedural. But a fourth round pick means another Tyler Irvin. Another fourth round pick means a fucking Travado Williams. Like the fourth round pick hit rates are not great. We don't have many fourth round picks to hit. Kiki Cutie is probably the last good one we had that actually made an impact on the field reasonably quickly. But whenever it's, oh, well, you got an extra fourth. And I said, well, we're still miles off where it needed to be.
I don't care about the fourth. The fourth does
Yeah,
nothing.
so
Like
throw
I
in.
wanted the first. But here's the thing. Here's what I think though, and I think this matters in terms of what our reaction is and how mad we can, or like we can do whatever we want, but how mad we should or shouldn't
Yeah,
be. The fact, maybe I should have asked this question to Nick Caserio, but the fact that like this was different from any of the other quarterback dramas that we saw from over the offseason. Like, let's just use Russell Wilson as the example, right? The other star quarterback that was traded. This was different because it was already well established, well known that Deshaun Watson would never play for the Texans again.
yeah,
And I am curious on how much that can hurt the negotiation. Like the fact that the year played out the way it did last year, and that Deshaun Watson not only very clearly wanted to be traded, but between the two of them, Watson and the Texans, they had shown a willingness to put him on the pine, to put him on the shelf. Like they had shown that they had proven to the world that he was never going to play there again. And so, like, I don't know how much that hurts your negotiation. Like, how much does it hurt you when you're saying, okay, we're only going to accept this for this player and nothing less? The other team's like, all right, well, that guy's never going to play for you again anyway. Like, to me, I was saying this last year before training camp, and all of this was still out there about the trade, him demanding the trade and all that they needed to operate from the standpoint that did not give off the impression that he would never play there again, because that would hurt their negotiating power. I did say that, did believe that if it became known and obvious that he'd never play there again, that would not be a good look for them when they start going and asking for compensation, because you can hold that over their heads. Oh, you're trading, you're demanding all of this for a player that is of no use to you. He'll never play for you again. So I always wondered about that. And then on the other end, since the no trade clause, like we mentioned earlier, what was going to change about the offers, about the deals? Like, did they come to a realization that whether this is impacting our,
yeah.
oh, he'll never play here again thing, whether that's impacting the negotiations or not, these are the offers we're getting, and they're less than ideal, but we are getting our 3 first. That's of course, in addition to us having our picks back, right? So now we essentially got 2 first in every round the next 3 years. Like, is it just time to cut our losses and move on? Like, I think that they just took the L. Like, I'm not arguing that you're wrong in the points that you're making. I just think that they looked at it and said, you know what, we're gonna take this L, and not focus on. I do this a lot in life too. Not focus on what the trade isn't, but focus on what the trade is. And what it is these 3 first round picks. All right. And I'm not trying to justify this, man, because I agree with you.
Yeah,
I'm with you. All right. But I became okay with it because it's like, well, this is the situation that they put themselves in. Okay. This is the culmination of bad business. All right. And what becomes the result? A bad business return. And I think for as poorly as they've done things leading up to now, they're somewhat fortunate to be in a situation now where they can build the team and move on from Deshaun Watson, get rid of his money. That's Cleveland's problem now. You do have the 3 first. I can't justify the compensation that they got back other than to say that they screwed themselves in negotiation by, and look, what was the solution to that? Do they force Deshaun Watson to play? Like, how do they fix that? I don't know. Like, it sucks that it had to be that this guy sat out the whole year. The whole world saw it. All right. And they agreed to let it happen, you know? So, like, I just think that the Texans, and more so the fans, I don't even want to say that they're victims because they put themselves in this, but the fans who wanted more and expect more are the victims in this.
Yeah.
From a transactional standpoint, because their team at every turn made bad decisions or made decisions that had domino effects on them. And so I tried not to harp on it, even though I agreed with everybody on the compensation part, wanted more, expected more, feel like they should have got more. Deshaun Watson would have been worth even more than that, okay, than what we thought the fair market was, because he's a franchise quarterback and gives you a chance to win. But them's the breaks, man, when you do bad business. And I think that the cost of waiting, to me, the downside of waiting would have just meant that you would have missed out on this draft. And I don't think that they would have been able to live with that, of missing out on having an extra pick, an extra first round pick in this draft, even though I thought they should have got more. I think that they saw an opportunity here. They're on their second head coach. Think about that too. All right. We don't know what Nick Caserio is being evaluated by. We don't know how long he's going to be, like what's his leash, what's his rope, right? We don't know the answer to that. But we're in year 2. He's on his second head coach. Year 1 wasn't good, wasn't expected to be. But like at some point you gotta
you
gotta get going at some point. So it just sucks, man. It sucks. I hate it, but I was ready to move on. I was like, okay, we got the three first. Let's go. This is a good draft to have the 3 first in. Now the pressure is hitting on every single one of those damn firsts.
Well, do you think he is under pressure? I mean, first point actually on that is, if you'd have waited a week or even 2 weeks or even 10 days, do you think David Tepper and Scott Fritterer in Carolina wouldn't have come back with another offer? Oh, actually, okay, we'll fully guarantee years 3 and 4. Do you not think Terry Fontenot and Arthur Blank, the owner in Atlanta, would have come back? We want to bring our boy home. Let's bring him back to the state. If you'd have given it an extra week, would that have made a difference? We'll never know. And again, it's hypothetical. We'll add that to the laundry list as, higher than that new skyscraper they're building on Lake Travis in Austin, going to be the highest building in Texas. The Texans hypotheticals could outbuild that brick by brick, but why did you wait? I think we'll never know on that one.
But then the follow-up question to that is, let's say that they do, and what? So what if Cleveland's the only one that's offering the $230 million, and that's where Deshaun Watson's going to go?
Yeah, and look, that might have been the case. Caserio might.
Right, so they would have had to offer more picks and the money. Yeah, because they're selling Watson. Yeah, they're really selling Watson. They've already sold Caserio because they got the 3 first round picks were clearly what it took to get into the door. Like, apparently nothing else mattered. So all you need to do to get in the door is the 3 first round picks. To actually get Deshaun Watson, you need to apparently pony up $230 million. So. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
And I'm surprised that if that was the stakes, and if you think of the position Atlanta are in right now, if you think of the position Carolina are in right now, they've got no answers at the position. Right. They even went as far as basically ended the relationship with Matt Ryan a year early, taking the biggest dead cap ever, which makes me suggest at some point when they were starting that process, they thought they were going to sign him. So for me, I just think you could have waited, and we'll never know. It's probably not too much point kind of dwelling on it. But it felt like, you maybe left the door. You should have left the door open just for that little bit longer. It didn't have to go through on that Friday. You could have gone Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday even, just to eke out the market, because, as you said, the deadline potentially spurs some. You see it in sort of soccer transfers all the time. People overpay for players at the last minute on the last day of the window every year because they go, right, we need to get this guy, let's do it. So, there was no deadline. You imposed a deadline for clarity. Does that clarity pay off? I don't know. And as you said there, Brandon, he has to hit on the picks. And I thought, from going from the start of the offseason to I'm immune to pressure, to then after going through the biggest trade and the biggest set piece negotiation, which arguably didn't attain full value back, he says, I'll be damned if I don't go down swinging. So that's a huge departure from I don't feel pressure. I'll leave that to you guys to I'll go down swinging. So it makes me think in the background, whether that's Easterby with his clipboard out giving him some pointers, or whether that's Cal or wherever, whoever the pressure is. Unless, it could all just be self-placed pressure to motivate him and make him do the best job ever. It could be either. But I thought that was a change in tone that was noteworthy.
Yeah, I just didn't think that he had as much power as we would like to think that he did as
Yeah.
the general manager. Like the way we like to view it is general manager holds all the cards. He doesn't have to do anything that he doesn't want to do. He can wait. And like I agree, I would have loved for him to have waited. But at the end of the day, Cleveland was sitting there waiting on $230 million. And like it wasn't no one owed. That's the thing that sucks. The only person that owed anything to the Texans here is Nick Caserio, and he's kind of got the least power. Deshaun Watson's got the power with the no trade clause. All Nick Caserio can do is say, "I won't trade you."
Yeah,
and he's done that already. Like he already did that for a year. So it's like, okay, here's what would be my question is: let's say he waits, and you've posed some hypotheticals there. But what changes substantively? Like they can come up with more offers, right? And that can better offers that are more satisfactory and more suitable for this. But Deshaun Watson doesn't have any loyalty or like obligation to the Texans. Like he doesn't care about what Carolina's offering, about what Atlanta's offering the Texans. What are they offering him? And so my thing on that is, yeah, I'm upset about the compensation, but I'm not sure what would have changed in a week, 2 weeks, or however long, if anything would have come up. Like basically, once the Browns come in and say we'll pay you $230 million, and Deshaun Watson says, yeah, I'll do that. Nothing else really matters. Everything else we're talking about is sort of just a bunch of minutia, because you got one team that's willing to pay a couple $100 million. And one guy that's finally willing to waive his no trade clause gets the final say in what that deal gets done. And that puts Nick Caserio squarely in the middle, of those two camps. So I thought he didn't have both hands tied behind his back. But to me, he was in a boxing match with one hand tied behind his. He was boxing with one hand, I thought.
Well, that's it, and I suppose the irony of it all is that Caserio can't go back to Atlanta and say, or Carolina and say, "Can you up the contract offer?" Because it's just not his place to do that. So, exactly. And that goes back to the point where it's. I mean, I'm sure he could have said it indirectly, but
who's to say he even knew? I have no idea. But who's to say he even knew about that? Because that's at that point, that's not even his business. So all he knows possibly is that Deshaun wants to go to Cleveland for who knows what reason, and then lo and behold, there are 230 million reasons why.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think you've got to let it settle in. You lost the biggest, the most important and best player you've ever had. Legal issues aside, to go to Cleveland. Which if you'd have said that to me 3 years ago, I never believed you.
But what's wild is, and I thought this is what you were going to say, you lost the trade before it even happened. You lost the trade when you negotiated the contract.
Yeah.
No trade clause. That was, you lost this trade in, what was it, August or September of 2020?
September, yeah.
You lost the trade that actually happened in March of 2022. You lost the trade in September of 2020.
Yeah.
Negotiated the trade clause.
And I wonder if there'll be any sort of reflection and stuff, because if I was Caserio, and the question they didn't ask, and I don't know if there was any questions you wanted to ask, you didn't get in.
Yeah, I did ask that question. I asked, what is the lesson?
Sorry, was that your follow-up? Yeah, sorry.
That was my follow-up, and then Landry asked it, I think, a little bit more acutely, but my follow-up was, is there a lesson from an organizational standpoint to be learned about how you deal with your star players, with your best players, and how those relationships are cultivated? Yeah. Because, and I just said, because the argument is, or would be, that this shouldn't have had to happen. Like, this doesn't happen and shouldn't happen. So how do you prevent it? How do you, from a relationship building standpoint, prevent that? And he gave some kind of answer about, hey, all the relationships in the building.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't get that question from the answer, but yeah, that makes sense now. Yeah.
Right. And then later on, Landry, I thought, asked it a little bit more directly. Like, how can fans be sure that this won't happen again? Like, basically my question, but in a more, like writing your chest, like, hey, how do we know that the next guy, this isn't going to happen with the next, and then that was the answer where where Nick says, "Hey, you can't bitch and complain," like he's to use the word.
Yeah, bitch and moan about the situation.
Can't bitch and moan about it. That was what that answer was from. So, I mean, he gave the answers that he wanted to give. He doesn't tend to answer direct questions with direct answers, and you got to do your best to read between the lines and try to figure out what is it that he's trying to communicate to you through whatever answer that he gives you, which is part of the art of media anyway. But he's very good at that at not giving a direct answer to a direct question and saying exactly what it is that he wants to say, no matter what your question was.
Yeah.
So, but that's a good thing to think about, though, right? As we talk about these first round picks, as we talk about the picks that we wish we had and didn't get, right? Like what you start getting these franchise cornerstones as it plays out. How is it going to be different? Is it just a matter of the kind of player that they get? Maybe somebody that doesn't just lose faith in the organization after one bad year and a couple of bad moves. Maybe somebody that just honors their contract or honors the spirit of their contract. I want to say, because it's not like he didn't honor it. They let him sit out and then traded him. Everybody says Deshaun Watson didn't honor his contract. I know what you mean. He didn't honor the spirit of it, but he actually technically did, because they didn't hold him account. They didn't make him honor it.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, he kind of did. But do you bring in just guys who are different, or do you make a change? Right? Do you do something different in how you deal with your players and how you build these relationships? I think that's going to be fascinating on whatever the next wave of stars. So, like, put Deshaun Watson in the section that includes J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know, whoever else that you liked from those teams. Maybe Whitney Merciless for a year or two until things went down. Like, put him in a section of, okay, these were the star players of this era. This is how it ended for all of them. Okay. What about the next batch? How will they reflect on their time? What will their time with the organization be like and feel like? And will the Texans have shown that they learn from these mistakes? They learn from the mistake. Will they have learned from the mistakes that turned them into a 4-win football team in back-to-back years? And who knows? God knows what they might be in 2022.
It wasn't a dead cause, and just understand from his point of view. And I'm sure he probably tried, and I'm sure that's part of his frustration.
Yeah, I would have a tough time believing that he didn't try.
Yeah,
and he mentioned not wanting to speak for Deshaun and what his intentions were or thoughts were, but I mean, he's spoken to Deshaun. He knows what obviously he dealt with his agent, so I think it was from both Deshaun and his representation where Deshaun stood, and that that his mind was made up at that point. It seems like he was dug in. I'll say this, and this is a projection by me, like a feeling type of thing. I'm not saying this with any kind of level of authority. I want to put that out there. But I do get the sense that more than I ever have, that Deshaun Watson is much more of a follower than a leader.
Yeah.
He plays a leadership position on the football field and is a quarterback and is really, really good at it, great at it. And so in our minds, we think of him as a leader because he's a quarterback and he's a great one. So he must be a leader. And that's fair. He plays a leadership position on the field, but like as a guy, as a dude, I don't get leader from him.
No.
I don't get, and I'm not like big alpha male type of guy, but like, I don't get that. He seems very impressionable. And I very much get the sense that all of this was more agent driven, more team driven, like his not the Texans, but his personal team. The voices in his head, if you will. And so, in that regard, I'm kind of, I kind of have soured a little bit on the guy just as a leader, as like the guy. I still think he's going to do great things in football. I think he, if he stays healthy, he'll continue to be a great player. But when we were talking earlier about asking him the question of what changed, could things have been fixed? Wondering if Nick Caserio got an impression from Deshaun. Could things have been fixed? Did he feel like he got a fair shot? I I don't know. I feel like those questions are better for David Mulugeta because I feel like that's the one that was actually making the decisions, that was actually influencing the calls and the decision
Yeah.
making here. Hey, David Mulugeta, not Deshaun Watson.
The reality is that unless the suspension comes in heavy or a greater degree than we'd expect, or versus president when the president of the NFL discipline policy has no fundamental basis or grounding, so it could be anything. Um, Unless that comes in, or unless there's some sort of injury or just some really bad luck for Cleveland, these next 2 years worth of picks might not be worth a whole damn lot, and they're probably 8 or 9 picks swing off what you got Ross Blacklock at. So the value and the equity, because when I sort of measured it up, I thought year one equity flow is in terms of draft picks, if you take players out of it in this instance, then it was how many picks did you get up front in year one. If you think of year one equity flow, year two equity flow when the quarterbacks are all going to come in the market, then
Yeah.
it's difficult to try and understand where and how the value comes in. But I think ultimately here you're reliant on the Laramie Tunsil trade not outstretching this unless you get some luck on your side. And we're due some luck, absolutely. But I think
Yeah.
the trade's gonna rely on parameters that weren't agreed and just by chance and where these draft picks end up, because they could be late.
Hey, tell me if I'm irrational about this. Is since you are one who was particularly disappointed with the compensation.
Well, I took some shit on that for Twitter. I think, what did I call it? I mean, I did a couple of drinks. I called Nick a fugazi, I think, and I got a couple of rather threatening private messages on that one. But
And that's where I get it, because I think that's it. Like, it is true that they didn't get enough, but I don't think it was Nick's fault. It wasn't because Nick's a bad negotiator. I don't think that's the reason why.
Well, I
But
don't know. I'm
he
still
might
waiting to
be
win a trade.
he might be impatient,
Yeah,
or maybe have lost his patience, which could be the sign of a bad negotiator. But I don't think that this is for sure indicative. Maybe he is a bad negotiator, but I didn't feel like this trade was indicative of that. Okay,
no.
but
Yeah.
I will say, and you tell me if I'm crazy for this. After I saw that there were no twos or no players, I felt totally different about them keeping Laramie Tunsil. I'm
Yeah.
like, I was kind of indifferent. I was good with them trading them. And then when they said they bring him back, I'm like, all right, whatever, sure. But now I'm like, man, go get the twos or whatever he's worth. Like, is he worth two twos? I'm sorry, I don't think he's worth a one at this point. But maybe he is. Maybe you can find somebody that'll give you one. Like, trade that guy. Trade that guy.
Well,
You're gonna draft off
you can't trade him now after reworking that contract again.
right,
So,
right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
I'm thinking, well, damn, you should have traded that guy,
yeah,
instead of reworking that contract, especially if you felt like or sensed that maybe you wouldn't get the full return that you might desire for Deshaun Watson because of the way you were hamstrung,
yeah,
both by no trade clause and by the time and by the public perception, or not just perception, but understanding that he was never going to play for you again. You have three things right there that are sort of handcuffing you, or not, maybe not just handcuffing you, but in part handcuffing you, and also in part just like vexing you, bothering you. The clarity, right? How much does a peace of mind cost you? Okay, if you know you're going to pay a premium for peace of mind, why not trade this other asset that you know is not going to really be useful to you for another couple of years, given that you're not expecting them to be good anytime soon? To me, I just the other reaction that I had, as opposed to being mad with Nick for not getting more, I think I was just as mad that he kept Laramie Tunsil, which was another trade asset.
yeah.
That as a player, I don't feel like has like a super utility for you. I don't think you need a Pro Bowl, like an All Pro Bowl type of left tackle to begin with. No matter how good you are, you just need somebody that doesn't suck.
Yeah.
But on top of that, you have one of the highest paid left tackles in football on a team that's probably not going to be any good. More than like we would be shocked if this is a competitive football team this year. Shocked.
Yeah.
Right. So what the hell?